Ryan Webb hated simulation days. The holographic enemies never felt real enough to trigger his focus. Yet they stressed him out anyway. He sat in the back row of the training hall, watching his classmates manipulate complex alien technology with ease. Finn could process 17 variables at once through his crystalline neural network. Lyra moved 3 mechanical arms simultaneously, while her real ones worked on something else. Even Otto, who was basically sentient gas in a container, could interface with computers faster than Ryan could blink. Being human at the Celestial Learning Station meant being average at everything. No telepathy, no extra limbs, no natural armor or energy manipulation, just a regular guy from Earth trying not to fail out of the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. The instructor, a tall being covered in blue fur, was explaining something about emergency protocols when the lights changed. Red warning strips activated along every wall. Ryan felt his stomach drop before his brain caught up to what was happening. That particular color meant one thing: hull breach. Everyone remained calm, the instructor said, though her voice carried an edge that suggested she was anything but calm. Proceed to your designated safe zones. This is not a drill. The students moved toward the exits in organized lines just like they had practiced. Ryan followed Finn's glowing form through the corridor. Around them, other groups of cadets hurried past, some flying, some walking on walls, some phasing through solid matter like it was air. The diversity of the galaxy on full display during a crisis. Then the screaming started. It came from somewhere ahead, multiple voices cutting off mid-shout. The neat lines of students broke apart as panic spread like fire. Ryan caught a glimpse of something moving wrong at the far end of the hallway. Something with too many legs and bladed limbs that reflected the emergency lighting. Back, go back, someone shouted in a language Ryan's translator struggled to process. The crowd reversed direction, bodies pressing against bodies as everyone tried to escape at once. Ryan got shoved sideways into a doorway. Finn stumbled after him. Then Lyra in her mobility suit, followed by Hugo, who barely came up to Ryan's knee. Then Petra, whose vine-like limbs wrapped around a door frame. And finally Otto, who simply drifted through the chaos. The door behind them slid shut with a heavy thunk that sounded far too final. Ryan pushed against it, but the emergency locks had engaged. They were sealed inside what looked like a chemistry laboratory, judging by the equipment and strange smells. What was that thing? Hugo asked, his large ears flat against his head. Through the rectangular window in the door, they watched the corridor outside. More of those creatures poured through from somewhere deeper in the station. They moved like spiders but were built like armored nightmares, each one the size of a small vehicle. Their blade arms cut through metal walls as easily as scissors through paper. Ravagers, Petra whispered, her normally green skin tone shifting to a pale yellow. I read about them in xenobiology. They are not supposed to be this far into civilized space. Ryan counted at least 20 of them visible through the window, and probably more out of sight. They seemed to be organizing, gathering in groups before splitting off down different corridors. Hunting parties, the safe zones, Lyra said. If we can reach Sector 4, the military keeps weapons there. That is 17 corridors away, Finn stated in his slow, precise way of speaking. We would not survive the first hallway. Otto compressed and expanded nervously, his gaseous form swirling inside his containment shell. Perhaps we can hide here until rescue comes? As if in answer, one of the Ravagers turned toward their door. Its head section had no visible eyes, just sensory organs that twitched as it scanned the area. It took a step closer, then another. It knows we are here, Hugo whimpered. Ryan's mind kicked into a different mode, the same one that activated when he used to explore the old factory ruins back on Earth despite his parents forbidding it. When you might fall through rusted metal or encounter something dangerous, you learned to assess everything as either useful or deadly. He looked around the laboratory. Chemicals in bottles, power cells for equipment, gas canisters marked with warning symbols, metal tools, a hydraulic press for demonstration purposes, and on the desk nearest to him a simple metal pen someone had left behind. We cannot fight those things, Petra said. No species here has combat training. We are students. The Ravager outside slammed a bladed limb against their door. The metal dented inward. It struck again and a crack appeared. Ryan? Lyra asked. Why are you smiling? He had not realized he was, but something in his chest had loosened, replaced by a cold clarity he had never felt during simulations. Real danger made sense in a way that holographic threats never did. Because I am from Earth, Ryan said, grabbing the pen and moving toward the supply cabinets. And humans did not get to the top of our food chain by giving up. But you have no natural weapons, Finn observed. Ryan pulled down a bottle of concentrated ethanol and a power cell from a teaching display. We did not need them. We made our own. The door cracked further. One of the Ravager's limbs pierced through, waving blindly. The other cadets pressed themselves against the far wall. Ryan worked quickly, his hands steady despite his racing heart. He had watched enough survival videos back home, had experimented with enough dangerous stupidity as a teenager. The knowledge humanity's darkest history was coded into his DNA and cultural memory. The door broke open. A Ravager squeezed through, followed by two more. Ryan held up his improvised explosive device made from the power cell and chemicals. Set to detonate on impact. Everyone get behind the lab tables, he said quietly. Now, then he threw it. The explosion tore through the front half of the laboratory in a flash of light and heat that Ryan felt even behind the heavy table he had flipped for cover. The sound hit like a physical force, leaving his ears ringing. Chemical smoke filled the air with colors that probably were not safe to breathe. Ryan lifted his head. The three Ravagers that had broken through were down, their armored bodies torn apart by the blast and embedded with glass shrapnel. But through the smoke and the ruined doorway, he could see more shapes moving in the corridor, many more. Is everyone okay? He called out. Responses came back in various languages, all translated by his earpiece into shaky confirmations. Finn's crystalline body had a crack running through it, but he could still move. Lyra had been protected by her mobility suit. The others were shaken but unharmed. That was insane, Otto said, his gaseous form swirling faster than normal. You could have killed us all. But I did not, Ryan replied, already moving to gather more supplies. And now we have maybe 30 seconds before the next ones figure out how to get through. He grabbed the metal pen from where he had set it down. It was a simple thing, heavy and solid, the kind they used for signing official documents because digital signatures could be forged. Ryan looked at the hydraulic press on the demonstration table. The machine was designed to show students how different materials compressed under pressure, using a small pneumatic system to generate force. Finn, can you calculate trajectories quickly? The crystalline being tilted his head, light refracting through his damaged surface. Yes, why? Because I need to know where to aim. Ryan began dismantling the hydraulic press, pulling out the pneumatic cylinder and pressure release valve. His hands moved with purpose, guided by half-remembered videos about improvised weapons and basic physics. Hugo hopped up onto a table, his huge ears swiveling toward the door. They are coming. I can hear their legs on the metal. Maybe 15 seconds. Ryan, what are you doing? Petra asked, making a gun. He jammed the pen into the cylinder barrel, testing the fit. Too loose. He wrapped it with rubber tubing from a nearby experiment setup until it fit snugly, or close enough. The hydraulic system had an electric trigger that normally released pressure slowly for demonstrations. Ryan bypassed the safety mechanism and rigged it to dump all pressure at once. The pen would shoot out like a bullet. Maybe not as fast as a real gun, but fast enough to punch through something soft. Lyra watched him work. Where did you learn this? Earth is not a safe planet, Ryan said, checking the pressure gauge. You learn things. He did not mention that most of what he knew came from curiosity and bad decisions rather than formal training. The galaxy did not need to know that human teenagers sometimes made dangerous devices just to see if they could. The first Ravager appeared in the doorway, stepping over the bodies of its kind. This one was bigger, with thicker armor plating and scars that suggested it had survived many fights. Ryan aimed the device at where he guessed the thing's brain might be. Assuming it had a brain, assuming the pen would even fire correctly, he pulled the trigger. The pneumatic system hissed and the pen shot forward with enough force to make the whole device kick in his hands. The metal pen hit the Ravager's head section and punched straight through, emerging from the back in a spray of yellowish fluid. The creature collapsed without a sound. It worked, Ryan breathed. Then louder. Finn, I need you to tell me where their weak points are. Hugo, you call out their positions before I can see them. Everyone else who start looking for anything we can use, another Ravager charged through. Hugo shouted a warning and Finn calculated the angle. Ryan fired, missed, then fired again as he manually pumped the pressure back up. The second shot caught the creature in a joint where two leg sections met. It stumbled but kept coming. The joints between armor plates, Finn said quickly. and the sensory cluster on the head section. Those are vulnerable. Ryan shot the approaching Ravager twice more, both hits finding gaps in its armor. It went down thrashing, blocking the doorway temporarily. Lyra, your mobility suit has hydraulics, right? Ryan asked while reloading his improvised weapon. Yes, for the mechanical arms. Can you use them to crush things? Lyra looked at her suit's arms like she was seeing them for the first time. I suppose so. I never tried. Try now. Petra, those vines of yours, how strong are they? Strong enough to hold my weight, Petra said hesitantly. Could you trip one of these things? Perhaps, but why would I want to get close enough to try? Ryan pulled down a canister of pressurized gas used for powering small burners. Because Otto is going to blind them first. Otto, you can compress yourself really small and shoot through gaps, right? Yes, but I do not understand what you want me to do. Scout ahead. Tell us what is coming, and when I say so, expand as fast as you can in their faces. Disrupt their senses. The team stared at him like he had grown a second head. These were students who studied history and science and art. They were not soldiers. They were barely adults by most species' standards. We cannot fight our way out of here, Finn said in his slow, logical way. There are too many of them. We are not fighting our way out, Ryan corrected, cracking open the gas canister and rigging it to a spark generator from a teaching kit. We are surviving long enough for rescue, and if that means turning everything in this room into a weapon, then that is what we do. More Ravagers gathered outside, their scraping sounds growing louder. Ryan tested his improvised flamethrower, getting a satisfying burst of fire. Humans have a saying, adapt or die. Today you are all going to learn to adapt. 5 Ravagers rushed the doorway at once. Too many for Ryan to handle with his makeshift weapons alone. This was the moment when his plan would either work or they would all die in the next 30 seconds. Hugo, positions, Ryan shouted. 3 coming straight, 2 breaking left toward the wall. Hugo's ears tracked movements before the creatures came into view. Finn, trajectory on the left ones. 17 degrees up, 23 right. Finn calculated instantly. Ryan fired his pen launcher twice, hitting 1 Ravager in the sensory cluster. It went down, but the other kept coming. Lyra suddenly stepped forward, her mobility suit's mechanical arms grabbing the creature's blade limb and crushing it with hydraulic force that bent metal. The Ravager shrieked, a sound like grinding machinery. Petra whipped her vine arms around its legs and pulled. The creature toppled, and Lyra crushed its head section with a sickening crunch. The 3 Ravagers coming straight reached the doorway. Ryan triggered his improvised flamethrower, spraying fire that filled the entrance. The creatures recoiled from the heat, their armor blackening. Otto shot forward as a compressed ball of gas, then expanded violently in the middle of their sensory organs, disrupting whatever allowed them to track prey. In that moment of confusion, Ryan shot 2 of them through gaps in their armor. The 3rd one stumbled backward into the corridor, temporarily blinded. We got them! Hugo cheered, then his ears swiveled. Wait, no. More coming, maybe a dozen. Ryan checked his supplies. The pressure system on his pen launcher was starting to wear out from repeated use. The flamethrower had maybe 3 more bursts before the gas ran out. They needed to move. We cannot stay here, he said. The laboratory has a back exit that connects to the maintenance tunnels. If we can reach Sector 4 through there, we can get to the weapons cache. Those tunnels are narrow, Lyra pointed out. My suit barely fits, which means the Ravagers will have trouble following us too. Single file, easy to defend. They gathered what they could carry. Ryan made 3 more explosive devices using power cells and chemicals, showing the others how to arm and throw them. Petra collected bottles of her own species' communication chemicals, the ones she normally used to share emotional states with other plant-based beings. Ryan had realized they were mildly toxic to carbon-based life. Mix it with this aerosol propellant, he instructed. It becomes a poison spray. These chemicals are for peaceful communication, Petra said, clearly disturbed by the idea. Right now, we need to communicate that we are dangerous. Ryan looked at each of them in turn. I know this feels wrong. You all come from worlds where violence is rare or solved differently, but those things out there do not care about your philosophy. They only understand predator and prey. So right now we have to be predators. Finn's crystalline form glowed dimly. This is very much not what I expected when I enrolled here. Me neither, Ryan admitted. But we work with what we have. They moved to the back exit. Otto scouted ahead, slipping under the door and reporting back through a small speaker device Ryan rigged up. The maintenance tunnel was clear for now. One by one, they squeezed through into the narrow passage. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits, barely wide enough for Lyra's mobility suit. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Hugo's ears twitched constantly. Sounds behind us. They found the door. How far to the next junction? Ryan asked Otto. 50 meters. But there is a problem at the junction. 3 Ravagers are there already. Ryan thought fast. The tunnel would force the Ravagers to come at them in single file from behind, which was good. But 3 ahead meant they would be trapped between 2 groups, unless they could clear the junction before the ones behind caught up. New plan. Petra, when we reach the junction, I need you to spray your poison at the ones ahead. Finn, can your body reflect light strong enough to blind them? If I angle correctly, yes. Do it right after Petra sprays. Lyra, you crush anything that gets close. Hugo, you keep tracking the ones behind us. Otto, you are our early warning for anything unexpected. They crept forward through the tunnel, every sound amplified by the metal walls. Ryan's heart hammered, but his hands stayed steady. This was nothing like the simulations. This was real fear, real danger, real death waiting in the shadows. And somehow that made everything clearer. The junction appeared ahead, a wider space where 4 tunnels met. 3 Ravagers waited there, their blade limbs scraping against pipes. On 3, Ryan whispered. 1, 2, 3. Petra stepped into the junction and sprayed her chemical mixture in a wide arc. The Ravagers reacted immediately, their sensory organs clearly affected by the toxin. Finn positioned himself and reflected the emergency lighting directly into their disrupted senses, multiplying the disorientation. Ryan charged forward with his flamethrower, not giving them time to recover. Fire washed over the closest one, while Lyra's mechanical arms grabbed another and slammed it against the wall hard enough to dent metal. The 3rd Ravager tried to flee, but Ryan shot it through the back with his pen launcher. Tunnel clear, Otto reported. The ones behind are catching up. Hugo warned. They ran. Ryan pulled out one of his explosive devices and set it on a short timer, placing it in the tunnel behind them. They had just reached the next junction when it detonated, bringing down part of the tunnel ceiling and sealing their pursuers on the other side. That will not hold them long, Finn observed. Does not have to, Ryan replied, checking the tunnel map on his datapad. Sector 4 is 2 more junctions away. We are almost there. Lyra flexed her mechanical arms, now stained with yellowish Ravager blood. Ryan, is your whole species like this? Seeing weapons and everything? Ryan thought about it honestly. Most of us try not to be. But yeah, when we have to be, we can be. It is how we survived long enough to reach the stars. The group moved forward together, no longer just students following human instructions, but a team that had learned to blend peaceful nature with violent necessity. They were still scared, still horrified by what they were doing, but they were alive and they intended to stay that way. The maintenance tunnel ended at an access hatch that opened into the main atrium, a massive space that formed the heart of the Celestial Learning Station. Ryan pushed the hatch open slightly and looked through the gap. His stomach sank. The atrium was filled with Ravagers, hundreds of them, maybe more, organized into groups that clearly showed coordination and intelligence. The large ones stood in the center, while smaller ones patrolled the perimeter. They had turned the beautiful open space into a staging ground for their assault on the secured zones. We cannot cross that, Lyra whispered, looking over his shoulder. Ryan studied the space carefully. The atrium featured a massive holographic display system suspended from the ceiling, used for academy-wide announcements and celebrations. Along the walls were powerful lighting arrays designed to simulate different planetary conditions for various species, and near their position, partly hidden by decorative plants, was an access panel for the oxygen regulation system. Actually, we can, Ryan said slowly, but we need to make them panic first. The others gathered around as he explained his plan. It was insane. It involved causing a controlled oxygen fire, using the chaos to eliminate the command structure, and timing everything perfectly to reach the far exit before emergency bulkheads sealed them in. One mistake and they would either burn to death or get trapped with angry Ravagers. This is a terrible plan, Finn stated in his calm, logical way. You have a better one? Silence, then we do this. Petra, can you release concentrated oxygen from your suit's life support? Petra's vine arms twisted nervously. Yes, but that could feed a fire large enough to consume this entire atrium. Exactly. Otto, you create a trail of flammable gas from here to that support pillar. Make it thin enough that it burns fast but does not explode. Lyra, you and Finn are with me. We go for the big ones in the center. Hugo, you stay here and listen for changes in their movement patterns. Hugo's ears flattened. You want me to stay behind? I need you to be our warning system. If this goes wrong, you run back through the tunnels and find help. Ryan opened the access panel for the oxygen system and began increasing the flow to dangerous levels. His father had been a safety inspector at a manufacturing plant on Earth. He had spent dinner times lecturing Ryan about all the ways industrial accidents happened. Ryan had been bored then. Now that knowledge might save their lives. The oxygen content in the atrium slowly rose, invisible but deadly in the right circumstances. The Ravagers seemed unaffected. Their alien biology adapted to different atmospheric conditions. Otto, now, Ryan whispered. The gaseous being spread himself thin, creating a trail from their position toward the center of the atrium. It took several minutes that felt like hours. Every second, Ryan expected the Ravagers to notice them, to charge, to end this before it began. Finally, Otto returned. It is done. Petra, release the oxygen. Make it flow toward the center along Otto's trail. Petra opened her suit's vents. Pure oxygen streamed out, heavier than the normal atmosphere, flowing along the floor like invisible water. It mixed with Otto's flammable gas, creating a mixture that would ignite spectacularly. Ryan loaded his last pen into the launcher, his hands surprisingly steady. This shot had to be perfect. One spark in the right place to start the chain reaction. Everyone ready? They nodded. Even Finn, whose cracked crystalline body reflected the emergency lighting and fractured patterns. Ryan aimed at the gas trail and fired. The pen shot through the air, its metal surface striking a support beam and generating a tiny spark. That spark touched the gas mixture. Fire erupted along the trail like a living thing, racing toward the center of the atrium where oxygen concentration was highest. The Ravagers noticed immediately, shrieking their mechanical sounds and scattering. But the fire moved faster than they could react. The center of the atrium became an inferno. The holographic display system exploded from the heat, raining molten components down onto the Ravagers below. The large ones, the command units that Ryan had identified by their behavior, tried to organize a retreat, but were trapped by their own numbers. Now, move, Ryan shouted. They charged into the chaos. The Ravagers were too focused on the fire and their burning leaders to notice 6 small figures running along the edge of the flames. Lyra used her mechanical arms to shove aside any that got too close. Finn reflected the firelight into the eyes of others, adding to their confusion. One of the large Ravagers, half its armor melted by heat, turned toward them. Ryan had no weapons left except a metal rod he had grabbed from the tunnel. The creature raised its blade limbs for a killing strike. Petra moved faster than Ryan thought possible. Her vine arms wrapped around its legs and pulled hard. The Ravager toppled forward, off balance. Lyra jumped on it, her mechanical arms crushing its head section with the full force of her suit's hydraulics. They kept running. The far exit was in sight just 50 meters away. Behind them, the fire began triggering safety systems. Bulkheads started closing to contain the blaze. The doors are sealing. Hugo called from his position, his enhanced hearing picking up the mechanism sounds before anyone else could. Ryan pushed his legs harder. His lungs burned from the smoke and the heat. 30 meters. 20. A Ravager appeared from a side corridor directly in their path. It was smaller but fast, blade limbs moving in patterns designed to cut them down. Otto shot forward and expanded in its face. In the moment of confusion, Ryan tackled it, using momentum rather than strength. They hit the ground together. The Ravager's blade sliced across Ryan's shoulder, drawing blood. He felt the pain but pushed it aside, jabbing his metal rod into a gap in its armor repeatedly until it stopped moving. Ryan, come on. Lyra grabbed him with a mechanical arm and lifted him to his feet. They dove through the exit just as the bulkhead slammed shut behind them. The sound of fire and dying Ravagers became muffled, separated by thick metal. They collapsed in the corridor beyond, coughing and bleeding but alive. Through the small window in the bulkhead, Ryan could see the atrium burning, the Ravager command structure in ruins. That was completely insane, Finn said, his voice somehow conveying emotion despite his alien nature. Ryan clutched his bleeding shoulder and laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. Welcome to fighting like a human. Alarms continued to blare around them, but these were different tones. Rescue alarms. Security forces responding. Help was coming at last. They had survived. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and something else Ryan could not identify, probably chemicals meant for alien biologies. He sat on an examination table while a medical technician sealed the cut on his shoulder with a device that made his skin tingle. Through the transparent walls, he could see his teammates receiving treatment in their own specialized sections. Finn was in a crystalline repair chamber, where carefully calibrated lasers fused his cracked structure. Lyra had been helped out of her mobility suit, revealing her actual aquatic form floating in a temporary tank while technicians repaired her equipment. Petra was being given nutrient infusions that made her leaves regain their healthy green color. Hugo was being treated for smoke inhalation, his large ears drooping but slowly perking back up. Otto swirled in a specialized containment unit being filtered of contaminants. They had been separated for medical treatment 3 hours ago. Before that, they had spent 2 hours being debriefed by security forces who seemed unable to believe what they were hearing. The door opened and a senior military officer entered, her uniform marked with symbols Ryan recognized as high rank. She had 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with her emotions, currently showing patterns he hoped indicated approval rather than anger. "Cadet Webb," she said in a voice that made his translator work hard to convey proper tone. "I have been reviewing the security footage from your encounter." Ryan straightened up, wincing as his shoulder protested. "Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what you did today?" He was not sure if that was a trick question. "We survived, ma'am. You improvised functional weapons from laboratory supplies. You taught peaceful species to adopt predatory tactics. You caused significant damage to station property and created a fire hazard that could have killed everyone aboard." She paused. "And in doing so, you eliminated roughly 47% of the Ravager forces before our security teams could even organize a counter-assault." Ryan did not know what to say to that. The officer's skin shifted to a golden color. "The Galactic Military Council is extremely interested in speaking with you. All of you. What you accomplished should not have been possible for untrained cadets." Over the next several days, Ryan's life became a series of debriefings, interviews, and demonstrations. Military analysts watched the security footage repeatedly, taking notes on everything. They were particularly fascinated by his improvised weapons. "We never considered civilian items could be weaponized so efficiently," one analyst explained to him. "Our species developed technology to avoid violence. We made weapons that require specific activation protocols and safety measures. The idea that a simple pen could become lethal had never occurred to us." Ryan found himself in the strange position of being both celebrated and feared. Other students looked at him differently now, some with admiration, some with concern, and some with something that looked like horror. His teammates handled the attention in their own ways. Finn approached it logically, explaining in his slow, precise manner how human tactical thinking differed from standard galactic approaches. Lyra became quiet, clearly disturbed by how easily she had adapted to violence. Petra refused several interviews, spending her time in the botanical gardens trying to process what she had done. Hugo became something of a celebrity among the younger students, telling and retelling their story. Otto seemed mostly confused by all the attention. Ryan was sitting in the cafeteria, picking at food he had no appetite for, when Finn approached and settled his crystalline form across from him. "You are troubled," Finn observed. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. I process micro-expressions efficiently." Ryan pushed his food tray away. "Everyone keeps calling me a hero, but I do not feel like one. I feel like I did something that came too easily. Like I knew exactly how to hurt and kill, and it did not even bother me in the moment." "You saved our lives," Finn said simply, "by teaching you all to be violent. Your species evolved on a peaceful world. You had no concept of weaponizing common objects before you met me. Now you do. And you can never unknow that." Finn's internal light pulsed thoughtfully. "That is true. But consider this from my perspective. I was helpless. If you had not been there, I would have died slowly, unable to defend myself or my friends. You did not make the galaxy violent. You taught us how to survive in a galaxy that already was." The Academy administration offered Ryan a position teaching survival tactics to cadets from peaceful species. The proposal came with full academic credit and guaranteed placement in any military or exploration program he wanted after graduation. Ryan stared at the offer on his datapad for a long time. The idea of spreading what he considered humanity's worst traits across the galaxy made him feel sick. But the alternative was watching more students die helplessly when threats appeared. "I cannot accept this," he told the administrator during the meeting. She looked surprised. "Why not? You have proven remarkably effective." "Because teaching violence without teaching restraint just creates monsters. If I do this, I need to teach both. When to fight and when not to fight. How to see weapons everywhere but choose not to use them. The difference between survival and savagery." The administrator considered this. "That would require a more comprehensive curriculum." "Yes. And you believe you can teach that balance? You, a 20-year-old who discovered his talent for violence only days ago?" Ryan thought about his father, who had worked in dangerous conditions but never stopped advocating for safety protocols. About his mother, who had taught conflict resolution to troubled kids. About Earth itself, a planet full of species that killed to survive but also formed complex social bonds and cooperation. "I can try," he said. "Or I can say no, and watch other cadets die because they were not prepared." The administrator's expression softened. "Very well. We will create a program with your specifications. You will teach survival tactics, improvised combat, and tactical thinking. But you will also teach de-escalation, proportional response, and the psychological cost of violence." Ryan accepted, though he still felt uncertain. That evening, his team gathered in their shared common area, a space designated for their study group that now felt like a memorial to their shared trauma. "They want me to teach others what I taught you," Ryan said. "I wanted to know how you all feel about that." Lyra spoke first, her voice quiet. "I hate what we had to do, but I would hate dying more." "The galaxy is larger than we thought," Petra added, "and more dangerous. Others should be prepared." "Just do not forget to teach them when not to fight," Hugo said, his ears twitching. "That is important too." Otto swirled in his containment shell. "You gave us a chance to survive. That is worth something." Finn glowed softly. "Teach them, Ryan. Teach them to survive without losing themselves. That is the real challenge." Ryan looked at his friends, his team. These people from different worlds who had learned to fight like humans and somehow kept their essential nature intact. "Okay," he said, "I will try." 3 months passed. Ryan stood in front of his first official class, looking at 23 faces representing 14 different species. Some had tentacles, some had wings, some were barely solid. All of them looked nervous about what they had signed up for. "Welcome to Survival Tactics and Crisis Response," Ryan began, keeping his voice steady despite his own nervousness. "Before we start, I need you to understand something important. This class will teach you to see danger everywhere. It will show you how to turn ordinary objects into weapons. It will push you to think like predators." He paused, looking at each student in turn. "But that is only half of what you will learn here. The other half is knowing when not to use what I teach you. Violence is easy once you understand it. The hard part is choosing peace when you have the power to harm." A student with feathers and multiple eyes raised a wing arm. "Why teach us violence at all, then?" "Because the galaxy has threats that do not care about your philosophy," Ryan replied. The Ravager attack was not an isolated incident. There are predators in the void who see peaceful species as prey. You deserve the chance to survive. He picked up an ordinary pen from his desk. The class watched it with sudden intensity, probably remembering the stories that had spread across the station. "This is a pen," Ryan said. "It is designed for writing. That is its purpose." He set it down. "But in a crisis, it could be a weapon. It could be a lockpick. It could be a breathing tube. It could save your life in a dozen different ways." He walked across the classroom. "The goal is not to make you paranoid. The goal is to make you adaptable. Humans survived on Earth not because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we could look at any situation and find solutions. The weeks that followed were intense. Ryan taught them to assess environments for both resources and hazards. He showed them how chemistry could be protective or destructive. He demonstrated improvised tools and emergency procedures. His teammates often guest lectured, each bringing their unique perspective to survival. Finn taught pattern recognition and threat assessment. Lyra demonstrated how to maximize equipment beyond its designed purpose. Petra showed the class how to use natural compounds for defense without killing. Hugo trained their observational skills using sound and subtle environmental changes. Otto proved that size and traditional physical form meant nothing when it came to adaptability. But Ryan also brought in conflict resolution specialists, psychologists who worked with trauma, ethicists who discussed proportional response. Every lesson on how to harm was balanced with a lesson on when restraint required more courage than violence. His class was halfway through the term when Ryan received a priority message on his personal communicator. Military encryption. Official seal. He read it twice to make sure he understood. The Ravager attack on the Academy had been reconnaissance. A larger force was gathering at the edge of civilized space, targeting educational facilities specifically. Earth's military command wanted Ryan to return home to train defensive forces in improvised combat techniques. But the Galactic Council also sent a message. They wanted him to stay at the Academy, to continue teaching and developing curriculum that could be spread across peaceful species military programs. Two choices. Both necessary. Both would save lives. Ryan sat in the observation deck that night, watching stars drift past through the massive windows. Finn found him there, his crystalline form glowing softly in the darkness. "You are troubled again," Finn observed, settling beside him. "Earth wants me home. They want me to train soldiers, but you want to stay here. Earth already knows how to fight. We have been doing it for millennia. What the galaxy needs is someone who understands both sides. Someone who can teach peaceful species to survive without losing what makes them special." Finn pulsed thoughtfully. "You fear that returning to Earth would make you too human again, too comfortable with violence." Ryan smiled sadly. "You understand me better than I understand myself sometimes. That is what friends do. We reflect each other clearly." The next morning, Ryan sent his response to both messages. He would stay at the Academy. He would continue teaching. He would help develop a curriculum that could be distributed across the galaxy. But he included detailed documentation of his techniques for Earth's military, trusting them to use it appropriately. His class continued to grow. Other instructors began attending his lectures, learning not just his tactics but his approach. The balance between capability and restraint, the philosophy that true strength included knowing when not to use force. 6 months after the Ravager attack, Ryan stood before a graduating class of survival tactics students. They had completed the program, learned everything he could teach them about adaptability and crisis response. "You all know how to defend yourselves now," he told them. "You understand improvised weapons, tactical thinking, environmental assessment. But here is your final lesson, the most important one." He held up a pen, the same ordinary writing instrument that had started everything. "When you look at this pen, you now see a dozen potential weapons. You see tools, solutions, possibilities. That knowledge is yours forever. You cannot unknow it." Ryan set the pen down carefully on the desk. "But you can choose what to do with that knowledge. You can choose to see the pen as a weapon only when absolutely necessary. The rest of the time you can choose to see it as what it was meant to be, a tool for creating, for communicating, for building rather than destroying." He looked at his students, seeing species from across the galaxy who had learned to balance their peaceful nature with the capability for violence. The galaxy is beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. You are now equipped to survive the dangerous parts, but please spend most of your energy enjoying the beautiful parts. That is what makes survival worthwhile. The class ended. Students filed out, chatting in various languages about their next assignments, their futures, their hopes for careers in exploration or diplomacy or science. Ryan gathered his materials slowly, feeling the weight of what he had created. A new kind of education for a galaxy that was still learning that peace required the capability for defense. Through the classroom window, he watched ships coming and going from the station, carrying students to hundreds of different worlds. Some of them would face danger, some would live peaceful lives. All of them now carried a piece of human adaptability, tempered with wisdom about when to use it. Finn appeared in the doorway. The council wants to expand your program to 15 other academies. They are asking if you will train other instructors. Ryan picked up his pen, turning it over in his hands. Such a simple object. Such dangerous potential. Such important purpose when used correctly. Yes, he said, but we do it right. We teach the whole philosophy, not just the tactics. That is why they want you, Finn replied. Anyone can teach violence. You teach survival with humanity intact. Ryan smiled at the unintentional wordplay. Humanity intact. Whether human or alien, the goal was the same. Survive without losing your essential nature. Adapt without becoming a monster. He looked at the pen one last time, then set it down to write a response to the council's request. Its original purpose. Its best purpose. Creating rather than destroying. The way it should be.